All right, quick video for the inner circle. I'm going to build a blog based off of GitHub issues really quickly. I'm going to do that using the Explorer and the code exporter. I'll make a longer video for other people with more context, kind of explaining what this is about. But largely, I want to show how impressive this tooling is and how quickly we can build really cool applications using it. And I'd love to get your feedback and thoughts on kind of how I can make it more exciting or more understandable. Okay, so let's go ahead and start. The first thing I'm going to do is add a query, and I'm going to treat GitHub issues as posts. So we'll call this post. I'm going to go ahead and go into GitHub and pull out a repository where I can find those posts. And I'm going to, by default, lock this down to sa.dev on OneGraph, but we'll go ahead and make these parameters that we could change a little bit later. Once I have that repository, we'll go ahead and pull out some issues. And I only want to pull out ones that have been created by me by default. This is my blog, but maybe we want to see other people's. Likewise, I only want to pull out the ones that are actually marked for publishing. And there we go. All right, so this looks good. This is called issues, but I want to call it post. That's how I'm thinking about it. So I'll go ahead and pull out the edges and the nodes here. Likewise, this individual node is going to be just a post. Okay, so now we have our individual post, and we want to get the body of that. We want to get the ID. We'll get the number and the title, and maybe the created at as well, in case we want to show that. Now, I also want to know who wrote this. So I'm going to pull out their avatar, maybe we'll say 50 pixels, get their login and their URL. And I'm going to reuse this in just a second, but I'll show how we can do that. Instead, first, let's go ahead and pull out the comments on this post, because it is a blog. We want people to be able to comment. And so I want to actually pull out this author here, but I'm going to do the same thing up here. So let's go ahead and just extract this to a fragment. You can see that now whenever I go up here, this is available for me to select. So it's looking good. Now for each of these comments, I want to do the same thing, just get the body and the created at. And I'm not a fan of the default name of this, so I'm going to go ahead and call this one author. You can see it updates all of the usages of it. And what's going to happen is each of these fragments actually kind of translates to its own visual component automatically, as is kind of the best practices. So now we have like a fairly robust query that can get us our posts and whatnot. But I want to start slicing this up so that we have kind of a nice component approach. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and extract our comments will be a component. And likewise, our, go ahead and call this post. Our post will be a component. And I'm going to rename these. So the issue fragment is going to be a post. And our comment fragment is just going to be a comment. And you can kind of see how our structure is already falling out. We have a posts, which is our top level query here. We have our author, a comment, and posts. So this looks good. I also want to make it so that this is an interactive blog. So I'm going to go ahead and add a reply here. This is going to do just what you'd expect. It's going to go into GitHub. It's going to add a comment, given a subject and a body. It'll then pull out that comment. So I'll just go ahead and reuse that fragment. Now the last one is I want to be notified whenever there is a new comment. So we'll go comment notification. We'll go into GitHub, and then whenever there is a issue comment event on a given repository and name. Okay, and so this is looking pretty good. We now have pretty much everything we need, and with kind of like reusable components in here as well. So now let's go ahead and open up our code exporter. And by default, this will create a code sandbox. What I'm going to do for the purposes of this video is actually just download the resulting app as a zip file and run it locally. Okay, so I've downloaded and extracted it, and now I'm just going to run 2 commands. I'm just going to install the dependencies, and I'm going to go ahead and run yarn start. All right, with that done, we'll go ahead and start. Okay, now that it's running, we can go ahead and look at the code as well. And we'll take a look at what the app looks like by default. You'll see that auth is already built in. You wouldn't see this in production. What you would just see is this login to GitHub button. So I'll go ahead and log into GitHub here. And there we go. We already have a post form, so we could actually search and for different posts. And you can kind of see how the nesting of the components, where we have the overall posts, we have that contains posts. an individual post has an author that wrote it, and then it has comments, and then those comments have some data, and then those comments have some authors. So you already see kind of a visual nesting of the components that we're going to slice up real quick. So let's go ahead and get started with the slicing up. To start with, I'm going to go ahead and go into, let's go into app real quick so that we can reorder the order of our components. To begin with, I just want to see the query at top. So we have our posts up here at the top now. So let's go ahead and look at our post query. And I'm going to leave the form for just a second. We'll see that in a little bit, but then we'll remove it. But to get started with, I see data for posts. So let's go ahead and search for data for posts. And the thing is, this is just a container. It doesn't really have a whole lot of data to show. So let's go ahead and remove that. And we'll just have a recent posts. And that's then rendering this paginated repository issue. So let's go ahead and jump into that. And here we go. Here are our individual posts. And so let's go ahead and just remove this as well. And now whenever we save this, we should see that we have our recent post and then our data for it and our nesting. So now let's go ahead and dive into our individual post, and it'll be the same idea where we just want to have, instead of the data for post, we'll have the title. And we can see the fields that we're selecting up here. So we'll say data.title. And this is going to be by, and I'll have our author here. And then we'll have a comments on. So we have our title and we have our author and whatnot. So go ahead and also add in our data. And you could obviously do this in a nicer way. Probably want to use some markdown renderer, but for the time being, I'm just going to go ahead and use our data.body HTML. And boom, we already have our title, our content, and our nested components. But let's go ahead and change this author and make that look a little bit better. So it's going to be the same idea. I'm just going to go ahead and look at the author component that was generated. And let's go ahead and remove it from the data box, which is this little green thing. And this is going to instead be an image. The source of it is going to go ahead and be the avatar URL, which we have up here. And I'll apply a little bit of style. And then also let's go ahead and add in a link back to this user. Okay, so now whenever I save, we're going to see the uses of this actually updated. So you see the author of this post is updated. But that's also used in the comments, if you remember. And so everywhere that has a little author use, we have that there. So let's go ahead and clean up our comments now. To do that, I'm going to go back to our posts. I'm going to look at our paginated comments. And now let's just go ahead and clean this up. We'll remove this outer container here. It's looking a little bit better. So let's go ahead and make the component itself nice. And same idea. Let's just go ahead and remove the styling. We'll set the content. And then we'll just say who it's by. And that should be enough for our comments to actually start looking recognizable. So you can see here we have a comment by the OneGraph bot. We can see some by me up at top. So you can see this already, I mean, obviously you could style this a bit better, but it's already looking pretty good. You'll notice this already has pagination built in. So there's not enough comments actually, but down at the bottom, you can see there's already a button that says fetch 2 more posts. So you can see pagination is actually already built in, and it also would work for paginating anything inside of the query. So if we recognize, for example, that comments can be paginated, we'll tell you that here's a fetch more button. So that's already generated, pagination, auth, everything. But let's go ahead and make this interactive. I want to make it so that we can actually reply ourselves. So inside of our post, I'm going to go back down to where our comments are, and we'll have another title. And to do this, I'm going to go ahead and use the reply mutation. And I'm going to set the subject ID to be hard coded to this subject. So we'll say data.id, and that should give us everything we need. So if we come down here, you can see that we actually have a little form already. So let's go ahead and clean that up. We don't want the user to be able to set the subject ID for this. We only want them to set a body. And we also want that body to be a text area. Okay, and before we actually leave a reply here, I want to do one more thing, which is I want to be notified whenever we have a new comment coming in. And for that, we're going to use the subscription that we built all the way down here. And we're going to go ahead and just render that inside of our app. And we're going to remove it. It's not a visual component, really. So we don't need it inside of a section. And we'll just go ahead and hard code it to our OneGraph sa.dev. So we also show you how to build it with both forms, but also just using props. So we'll pop that in. And now what I'm going to say is whenever we get some data on our subscription, so I'll just find the use subscription here. I want to actually toggle a new toast. And so I'll say some new. So first, let's go ahead and set some new state. By default, we won't show any toasts. But whenever we do get a new set of data coming in, we'll go ahead and set show toast to true. And then we'll only have that true for maybe 2.5 seconds. So we'll go ahead and say set show toast to false. And we'll do that in about 2.5 seconds. Now, for our actual element that shows it, we're going to just say, go ahead and remove this. And it'll be the same idea. We're just going to say new comment on your post. And we'll just render the comment uses there. That's perfectly fine. And for this, we're just going to add some pre-built CSS, snack bar, and show. And then, okay. And so now inside of our actual component, we don't really need anything except for our data element, which will be called the notification. Okay, and with that, we should actually be good to go. So we have our reply down here, and we'll go ahead and say, and whenever we run this, we'll see that this came in here, but also we get this nice little notification. And likewise, if we were to actually go to the site and, to GitHub and leave a comment, and now whenever I leave a comment here, we'll still get a notification. So even if it happens offsite, it'll come in here. So the last thing to do is, of course, to change this to the title. So, and inside of our app, we'll go ahead and remove our subscription, our reply mutation. So actually, to finish this off, let's go ahead and just remove our form element. We don't really want it anymore. Although we could come in here, for example, and say, show me all the posts by Daniel. And now we actually have this nice little browsing system where I can say, I can go ahead and run that and leave a comment on his posts. But of course, we don't want that. This actually should just be locked to me. And we'll go ahead and remove the action element as well. And the name. And there we go. So now we have a full blog with nested, nicely maintained components. There's pagination built in, there's auth built in, it renders. Basically, all you need to do is add your styling and you're good to go.